Clive Berghofer is a name synonymous with the Queensland city of Toowoomba. But his remarkable generosity to QIMR Berghofer Medical Research Institute and many other philanthropic endeavours has ensured his name will be forever etched in our history. This is Clive Berghofer's story. Clive, thank you for your time today. I'd like to start our conversation with your earliest memories on the farm near Toowoomba. What can you recall?
Well, I come right from the bottom. I couldn't have come any further than the bottom. See, I was born in 35 when the war started, and it finished in 45, so the 10 years of my early life as the war was on. We lived on a share farm at O.A.M, and we had no money, we had no car, we had no electricity. I didn't even have an ice chest, and so we lived it very, very hard. And my father grew up in the Depression, and a lot of people said, no, kids do not have to do what we had to do. My old man kicked my backside, taught me how to work, taught me how to do my job properly, and how to be honest. And I'll tell you, that's three very, very important things in life. So, and that's how I started off.
So he was a tenant farmer. He didn't own the land, he was a share farmer.
Just a share farmer, yeah. He actually had two jobs. He drove a milk truck from the Downs Dairy, picked the milk up, and he got the job then as a share farmer on one of the farms at O.A.M. And he did both jobs, and he got out of going to war because he was carrying milk was an essential item, so he got out of going to war.
So where did you go to school?
Well, I had a beautiful education. The O.A.M school was a one teacher school with 16 children in the whole school from Prep 1 to grade 7. We had this little classroom about as big as this square here, and the teacher just come back from the war, and I think he was shell-shocked because he used to walk up and down the middle of the classroom smoking a cigarette and talking to himself, and he reckoned that Berghofer was the most hopeless bastard I've met in my life. I know what'll ever happen to him. I was so bad at school, I was frightened, I was scared because I couldn't read, I couldn't write, and I couldn't spell. I always say I came fourth in my class. That's better than saying I came bottom because there's only 4 in the class. I could beat the other 3 at arithmetic. That's the only thing I could beat them at. But if my old man said to me when I was 11 or 12, come home and fork hay all day with the men, that was the greatest thing in my life. Getting out of going to school.
And so how old were you when that happened?
Well, I left school at 13. I got the scholarship. You did scholarship after grade 7 those days, and I got the scholarship, and the teacher said, it's no good at sitting for scholarship because you won't pass. I said, well, that's the best news I've ever heard, because I said, I was so bad at school I didn't want to go to it.
But you were good at numbers?
Good at numbers, yeah. And then there was a sawmill started at O.A.M. It used to be a railway line, and they used to bring cypress pine in from out the other side of Cumberland, out the other side of Dalby. And I got a job there cutting firewood in the sawmill at 13, £3 a week. That's how I started.
Okay, so from 13, you're working in the sawmill. Then how did your working life progress?
Well, I did a lot of weekend and hobby work, nighttime weekends and holidays. At 14, I broke the record of how many bags we sold in a day. Those days you had wheat bags, you didn't have bulk handling. And I couldn't do anything with paper, so I was determined to do more than those other men were doing. In the sawmill, if I'd said my job was cutting the firewood, the lowest job. The next job was the spotting man, taking the side off the log. He'd go to the toilet, wouldn't come to work, he was sick or something. I'd say to the boss, can I have a go at that? And I'd get on there and I'd go like bloody hell on it. And he said, you're the best, you can stay there. So by the time I was 15, I was the number 1 benchman, the top. But I was still only getting £3 a week because I was only 15. But I used to do a lot of weekend work. I worked in sawmills until I had to do national service. I did national service when I was about 18 or 19. And 2 things I didn't like doing in life was going to school and going to national service.
So where did national service take you?
It was about 1955, and that was the 3-month one. And then after I come out, I thought I was good with my hands and I liked timber. And I'd like to get an apprenticeship. I couldn't get an apprenticeship because I had no education. I got a job as a carpenter's labourer at Oakey, and I thought if they can do it, why can't I? So I watched. In modern day they say I'm dyslexic, and I can't be taught anything. I've never been taught anything in my life. Everything I've got to teach myself to do. And I watched when I was a labourer, I watched the other tradesmen, and I said, well now, they're fitting that door. If I do it like this, I can do it just a bit quicker and a bit cheaper. And I taught myself, and I used to go out, we did a lot of farm work, and I'd say to farmers, I'm looking for weekend work. You got any weekend work? He said, yeah, we want a fence built and want a shed built. You're the best worker here, you can have the job. So after 4 years, I built up such a business with my weekend work. I used to build model dairies weekends for the farmers, and in 1959 I started in business in Toowoomba. I built my first house in Toowoomba in 1959, and that started me going. And I thought, well, my father, he always worried about me. He said, oh, you're a fool, going out in business, you're making worry for yourself and so on. And I taught myself not to listen to anybody because, I took my own advice. And then I was building houses, and then I started employing people to help me.
So you're 24 at this stage? About 24 years old, right?
I would have been about 24 at that stage, yes. I didn't ever build spec houses or anything. I had that much work that because my word of mouth flowed on. If I built a house for your father, you'd say, well, I want a house. So he'd just say, well, get Clive to build it, you see. And that's how I worked on. In 1964, I thought, well, I better buy a block of land in case I need to build a spec house if I get short of work. So I went to an agent, and he said, well, this land here is for sale. He said, and when he sells all that, he's going to buy the 10 acres above. He said, if I can buy the 10 acres above, why can't I, And I didn't have very much money, and I managed to do this, and I did this as a sideline, developing land.
So 10 acres?
10 acres.
And where was that?
That was over what we call Berghofer Street, and Yvonne Street was my wife's name, was Yvonne Street and Berghofer Street. And we were selling blocks of land then for £200 a block. Anyhow, I thought this is easy money. Then the first thing I haven't had to work for. We paid council to do the development and what have you. So I continued developing land. I built houses. We used to build a house a week with one gang of men. If I started your house today, 3 weeks maximum before you moved in. And I just had the knack of doing things quickly and properly. And 1972, they called tenders for the Wilson Hotel. And by that time, I owned quite a bit of land around that I was buying up for development. And I had a piece of land where the Wilson Shopping Centre was. And I tendered on it. I beat 3 of the leading hoteliers in Queensland. Knew nothing about hotels. I designed it myself, drew the plan myself. No architects or anything. And the licensing commission took a bit of liking to me. They said, this bastard's got a bit of up and going. And I won the tender for the hotel. I built it in 6 weeks, the whole hotel. I put a manager on to start off with, and after 3 months I said I can manage this better myself. And I finished up putting him off, and I managed at night time and weekends. So 15th December 1972, I opened the hotel. March 73, council election came up. And I've been building houses, and I think, well, now I can direct this council to be a bit better place to do things. And I put in for council. I won the election. There was 48 people stood for the 8 positions, and I won the second highest vote. Didn't even know what voting was. Didn't ever have a vote card. Didn't do a thing. But I'd sort of worked up a reputation with people by the way I worked, you see. So I'm running the hotel, I'm a councillor, I'm running all my construction business, and no one ever waited for me. So they did that for 9 years. I had 3 elections, 9 years as a councillor. In 1982, then I stood for mayor.
Just before we get on to mayor, so at what stage did you meet your wife and get married?
In 1959 when I started in business.
Yeah, okay. So marriage came along during that busy time of business. When did family come along?
Well, that was my second marriage, and I had one daughter from the previous marriage that came up into this, and that was Joanne and Lynn, my second daughter. She is an amazing girl, I tell you. She runs my office. Her and her husband, Peter Lamb, runs my office now, and she's a chipper off the old block. She's trying to do everything the right way. And
on the Wilsonton Hotel, you say you won the tender. Is that the way did the government control it, and you had to tender?
Those days they wanted to put a hotel in the Wilson area, and they said anywhere between Bridge Street and North Street and Greenmottle Street and Gordon Avenue, anybody with land in that area can tender on it. And that's what happened. And no one knew much about tendering from the hotels those days. And but anyhow, I worked out a way to do it, and I built it so cheaply because I built it myself in such a short period of time. But that hotel, it made records, I tell you. It was the highest licence fee of any hotel in Australia, 4 times higher than the next best. I sold 4 times more liquor than any Cunningham in West Australia, the furthest customer I knew of.
It became an institution, didn't it?
Ah, everybody knew the Wilson Hotel. If they were coming from Brisbane, when I got into Parliament, they'd say, some of the members would say, we used to call in there, some of the bureaucrats would say, we're going to Rome, and they'd take a load of grog to Rome. And then coming home back to Brisbane, they'd take back to Brisbane. There's nothing we didn't put liquor in. If the hearse come to town with a body, they'd fill the hearse up with, if the ambulance came in, they'd fill it up with stubbies. Doesn't matter what, we loaded into sleeper cab, we loaded into everything. So, and it made a lot of history around. And I built it for $300,000 in 6 weeks. I used to make about $750,000 near profit on it, and I sold it after 13 years in 1985 for $6.5 million, and I got it tax-free because it was my principal place of residence. I was the licensee, and I lived on the premises.
Well, that was one you put over the taxman, well and truly. Now tell me, 1982, politics was growing in your psyche and you became mayor. What did that mean for you?
Well, it meant I had to direct people to get things done and make things happen. See, where I was at an advantage, I'd been there and done it. If you came to me with a problem, I could sort it out for you because I've been there and done it myself. I never ever made promises I could not fulfill. If I could fix your problem, I'd say, yeah, I'll fix it for you. If I was doubtful, I'd say, I'll have a look at it. If I fixed it, I was a hero. If I didn't fix it, I'd say, at least you tried. All these politicians now, they promise you the world, come away and tell you exactly what you want to hear, and they go away and do nothing. So they can't work with the bureaucrat because they haven't had the experience in doing it. The engineers, I could see things they were doing wrong with earthworks and things, and I'd make sure I was going to win. And I'd tackle them and I'd prove him right, you see. And they got confident and they say, this bugger knows what he's talking about, And that's, politicians today, they just want to try and satisfy people.
So how long were you mayor for?
Almost 12 years, about 11 and a half years. The bureaucracy was getting to me. They were doing the same to me as they were doing to Joe Bjelke-Petersen. They said that they were firing, the opposition was firing shots at me, and I thought, I got more to do in life than be, bloody abused about people like this. And I resigned about 6 months before the end of the 4th term.
And you went on, you became member for Toowoomba South, didn't you? How did that come about?
Well, that was in '86. Joe Bjelke-Petersen came and he said, we'd like you to stand for Toowoomba South. And I thought, well, bloody hell, there's another challenge. And the opposition said, you can't do 2 jobs, you won't get voted in. So anyhow, I stood against them, and I think I got 64% of the vote, something like that. And I did the 1 term, and that was a difference in politics then, because Joe Berghofer there for 20 years and no one challenged him. Here, I worked for 4 premiers in the first year, first 3 years with Mahern and all the rest of them. I got elected then into the second term with Wayne Goss. Wayne Goss could see me a bit of a threat. He said, so we've got to get rid of this bugger out of the road. So he brought in legislation. From the year dot, you could be a mayor, a councillor or a member of parliament. And he brought in legislation that we couldn't do the 2 jobs. So they even called it the Berghofer bill in government. And they voted and it went through, and I had to resign from one, so I resigned from, and I did about 4.5 years as a member of parliament for Toowoomba South.
What legacy are you most proud of having left Toowoomba during your period as mayor?
What legacy? Well, satisfying people. I've still got people now come along and say, when the hell are you going back as mayor? And you know, you'd have the old worker that worked there. There's most of them are gone now. But you know, you'd see them and they say, this bloody place is in a mess, we want you back. You know? And I might be a wealthy person. I made myself wealthy with my own hands. You know, worked my way up. I taught myself how to do so many different things, and I could do so many different things at the same time. And but I still worry about the working man. All this bloody bullshit we're going on with now with red tape, it's costing the working man at the end of the day. He pays for it at the end of the day, you know. And they call themselves Labor people. They're no more bloody Labor. I'm more Labor than what they are because I respect the working man. He's the person that's made me wealthy because I've worked with these people. That's why I want to put a lot of money back into the city, because I got the money out of the city and I want to put it back into it.
You're old Labor, really, aren't you?
Well, my father was, they call them Tories those days. They hated the Tories. He grew up, he was only a labourer. I went to start a school at Canberra, and he used to go corn picking, he used to go wheat lumping, with bags of wheat those days. He'd have fencing or what have you. And he could be working on Sunday, he could be working on someone putting a fence up for some farmer. They'd be sitting on the veranda drinking grog, and they wouldn't even bring him a glass of water, you know. So I voted Labor right up until after I built the hotel. Labor helped, I don't think of the name of the guy that was here at the time, but he helped me get in. But then when Joe Berghofer saw me, and I said, well, this bloke, you know, he's got a lot of potential here. You know, so I thought, well, and I think the National Party is sort of between the 2 parties, personally, between Labor and Liberal. And like there were a lot of people that have been there and done things, you know, and they were different group of people to what we have now. See, what is killing politics now, they're overeducated people really. Most of them are lawyers or doctors or union reps or something like that. They've never had a real job to produce things and know how to produce them.
If I can get on to QIMR, how did you first get involved with QIMR?
Well, in the 80s, they were going to build a basketball court out at USQ, and they said, we're looking for donations. If you give us 500,000 for a set of seats, we'll call it the Berghofer Centre, you see. And I thought, well, I've got no boys to carry my name on. Perhaps if I do something like this, they can come when I'm dead and go on and they'll say, oh, that was Berghofer over here. And so that sort of started the ball rolling. So a bloke by Chuck Sheeny came, and he's a billionaire from New York, and he said to QIMR, I'll give you 20 million if the state give you 20 and the federal give you 20, which they did, and they built that new building there where the Clive Berghofer Cancer Research Centre is. And what had happened, they came to me while they were building and said, oh, we'd like a donation, would you do something for us? So I gave them $10,000 towards it. This is before I even knew what QIMR was really, except for a letter that came to me. And anyhow, when they opened it, they invited me along, you see, and they in their speech they said, you know, what we want to do is sell the naming rights of this for $1 million a year over 5 years. And you put your name up there for 5 years, or if you give us another 5 to 10, we'll put your name up there for perpetuity, you see. And I sort of pricked my ears and I thought, you know, that sounds pretty good. But the lady went around Queensland, couldn't get anybody to do it, went to New South Wales, and this is the difference between New South Wales and Queensland. And they said, how could you, and QIMR is the best and the biggest medical research centre in the Southern Hemisphere. And they said, how can you have the best and the biggest in Queensland? Should be built in Sydney. You know, we won't give you any money. She got an interview with Kerry Packer, and Kerry Packer, she said, I've never stuck anything like it. He sat there with no shoes and socks on, with his feet up on the desk, smoking, burping and farting, and he used some very crude words. He said, we won't give them F and C's in Toowoomba, you know, in Brisbane. So they came to me and I said, all right, I'll do it for you. And that's how that got started there. Then they got the next gift from Chuck Sheeny. He put in another 27 million, which helped build the next building. And then I bought the naming rights of that there, for that building there. I paid them 50 million, 2 million a year over 25 years. And some of it I've been giving them 2 lots of 25 a year. And then when the COVID came in, they weren't getting any money to help them. So I said, I'll give you $1 million to get you started on research to see whether you can do it. So, you know, and I get lots of credit from that. You know, cancer, I had a guy that worked with me for 31 years, died of cancer. I had another survivor that worked with me for 25 years that died of cancer. And I thought, well, see, cancer is a different disease to any other disease. It's there forever. The youngest I've seen is 1 year old with cancer. Where a lot of disease young people grow out of and older people grow into, where cancer is right through. That's why I've sort of tried to help cancer. See, but they don't only do cancer, they do every part of the human body. You know, they've got a lot of science. It's an old organisation, I think it's only 80-year-old. So, you know, they've got a pretty good reputation of what they do.
A good fit for you?
Yeah, but I always say the older you get, the more important health is. You can't buy health. And the older you get, the more important. Without good facilities and without research, I've got 2 new knees and a new hip, and I say, if they hadn't done research on knees and hips, I'd be still hobbling around the place, you know.
So it was really about a lot more than just your name?
What's that?
It was about a lot more than just your name?
Oh, yeah, no, it's just, and St Vincent's Hospital, Careflight, Ronald and Don's house in Brisbane. I had a beautiful email from a couple recently, and they said, we just want to thank you for saving our baby's life. Our baby was 6 weeks old and had a stroke. And Careflight got to the lady Sorrento with an hour of it dying. They saved its life. It had to go in intensive care for 11 days. And we said we stayed in Ronald and Don's house on the Berghofer floor that I gave $3 million to while she was in intensive care. And, you know, that makes you feel pretty good that, you know, and I met him at a function with Careflight about 6 months later, and this little girl was there, you know.
Do you keep across what is happening at QIMR Berghofer, you know, what research they're doing? Do you stay in touch with that?
Yeah, they send a lot of the stuff, email a lot of stuff through. We meet down there every so often, have lunch and someone down there. But, no, it's a great organisation, and but as I say, health, any part of health is very important. Without good facilities and good hospitals.
What would your message be to other people, you know, of wealth and thinking of donating money? What would your message be to them about donating to QIMR Berghofer?
Well, Australia's pretty lousy when it comes to it, really. Americans are much bigger doing this. But, you know, you got to be a generous person. You don't need deep pockets. All you got, you know, I'll leave my family quite wealthy when I leave. And O.A.M was worth 370 million the last time I was in the Business Review Weekly. And I don't have shares, I only have money or real estate, you know, and so, you know, I can't take it with me. So if I can help someone before I go. See, St Vincent's Hospital, what I did for St Vincent's Hospital, it's an old hospital, it's 100 years old. They built 12 of them 100 years ago. They just started building them. And Sisters of Mercy, it's an old hospital, it had needed repair, it had a mongrel of a CEO. What had happened, they came to me about 15 years ago and said, we want to build an intensive care unit, we're short of 750,000. If you give us 750,000, we'll call it the Clive Berghofer Intensive Care Unit. And anyhow, I did that, and I had close affiliation with the hospital. And then the next building came along, and they called it, anyway, they rang me back and said, we're going to build 6 new operating theatres, new kitchen for $40 million, and we called the Clive Berghofer Operating Theatre, see. And then the next one came along, and they wanted a new emergency centre and a new Queensland X-ray. And she came and she said, we're short of 3 million. So short of 6 million to build. It's worth 16. Melbourne give us 10 and a half. We need another 6. I said, leave it with me. I was throwing Toby up in Melbourne, and I said, I'll put another 3 in if you put 3 in. So then they called it the Berghofer Wing. And you know, I get enormous response, and you know, I've been up there a couple of times with the problems, and the nurses and the doctors, they can't do enough for you, you know, and that's respect. And if you don't learn respect from people, you know, that's something you've got to earn. You can't buy respect, you've got to earn it.
Tell me about your interest in the Broncos.
Broncos, well, I was a major sponsor of. See, I didn't even know what a football was until I was about 38 when I built the Wilson Hotel. Like I can't swim, I can't do anything because the Welcome School had no swimming pool, didn't have a tennis court for 2 people to play. We couldn't get a team anything together, so marbles was the only thing I could play. And so I built the hotel, and then the Wilson School came to me and said, we want to build a swimming pool, and we want a chocolate wheel. I didn't even know what a bloody chocolate wheel was. I wanted to use a chocolate wheel to raise some money. Will you help us? So I said, oh, we'll get into it, you know. So that happened. Then the footballers started coming to me. I didn't even know what a football was until then. You know, and I'd go to a football match and they'd say it's a knock on or high forward passer, what the hell's that, you know. Didn't have a clue. But then I started sponsoring Newtown football, and I became their major sponsor, their patron, and I was everything sort of thing. And we used to do enormous raffles there. It was such a busy hotel. We used to have about 6 or 8 people raffling there at once. Lunches and dinners 7 days a week. And we raised a lot of money for various clubs, and then the Clydesdales come along with the Queensland Cup in '96. And anyhow, I was their major sponsor, and then eventually it started off just sort of a club game, the first game, but then they started to get a bit serious. You know, you got the Roosters sponsoring Redcliffe and so on. So we were going backwards. So eventually then Bennett came along and he said, we'll make you our feeder club, which and then I was the major sponsor of that, and that's how I got involved with the Broncos. And then eventually they dropped us, which I was a bit annoyed at Bennett. But then when they built Suncorp, I bought some really good tickets there. I bought car parks under the building and so on. And rugby league is one of the games I sort of follow more than I sponsor every type of sport possible. But with the league, so they came to me then. They said we're building our new training centre. And we'd like about 3 million. If you give us 3 million over 6 years, we'll call it the Berghofer Centre, which they did. And so, and I get to the chairman's room every time and so on. And so I've got a really good relationship with the Broncos through that.
So you still go to games at Suncorp?
I go to all the Suncorp games, yeah. See, Peter Lamb, my son-in-law, he was a policeman, and he went through police academy with Bob Bennett, Wayne Bennett was his PT instructor at the Police Academy, and Paul White was also a policeman, and they've been friends ever since, sort of thing. And that was a close relation. Bob come up and worked up at the Turf Club here for a while, and he came to me and he said, if you give us some money, we'll build a tent up here and call the Clive Berghofer tent and so on. And they used to ring Peter up to try and get Peter to get to me, you see. Peter said, just ring him up. So they come up, Paul White and Wayne Bennett come up and sat in my office. They said they wanted to see you. I didn't have a clue what they wanted. And they told me this story about, giving the money. And they was out two lovebirds there together, you see. And only 6 months later, they're fighting like cats and dogs. So.
Have you got any idea how much money over the years you've given away?
Probably estimate about 110 million probably so far. But I've got a foundation formed now which is going to have a lot of money in it when I do pass on. But I try to do things that help health more than anything else. I do a lot for sport, a lot for education and not for health. And education is important. See, I helped a lot of schools get swimming pools here because I couldn't swim myself. And I thought, well, I've got to try and help the others swim,
A lot of wealthy people could learn from your philosophy.
I went down here recently. I forget the foundation that Mike O.A.M set up some time ago. And they came to me and they would like you to come down as a guest speaker, you see. And Mike is pretty bad. He's not really well. He said Mike is not well. He hasn't been to a meeting for a while, but he'll come along with you. And I'm sat beside Mike, and I get up and went through the story like I did here, sort of thing. And Mike, when I come back, he said, I'll give you 11 out of 10 for that.
So how old are you now, Clive?
87, 4th of May. My birthday, I'm 87 now.
Still involved in the business?
Just as I go down to the office every lunchtime and sort of, they might have a problem that we can sort out from that, but I've got to the stage where I haven't got the energy to do things, sort of thing, and I'd love to be able to do it, but you just, I'm still active and moving and that, but I'm sort of, I worked right up till I was 93 out on the job, 83 on the job, and so I've seen, people say, well, tell Clive what to do, and one of the engineers said, you won't tell Clive what to do. He knows what he wants to do.
I think this is the first sit-down interview I've done with you since about March 1983.
Right.
That's 39 years, a long time, isn't it? Clive, it's been great talking to you. Any words of advice to today's generation about how to live their life? Any words of encouragement or advice?
I'm very disappointed with Australia. The young people, they're so demanding. For God's sake, sit down and I started with nothing and worked my way up. A lot of people don't want to start at the bottom, they want to start at the top. And that's a stupid place to start, I can assure you. And you got to give and take, And I find if you treat people with respect, most people will treat you with respect back, And I've had a motto in life: I want to do things better, quicker, and cheaper than anybody else. And if I was building you a house, and if I could save you money, well, a lot of people want to get extra money out of you. If I could save you $1, I'd save it for you. And with good advice and what have you. And I think that's where greed has become a terrible thing. Like with the building industry at the moment, it's in a hell of a mess. The government, the Morrissey put on this stimulus package, which was quite a good package, but it went, builders that were building, say, 30 houses a year, they tendered on 100 houses. Greed, instead of saying, look, we can't do any more than 30, and now we've got all these backlog that's creating huge problems. And it's going to, poor old working man that's getting a house built is going to be one that's going to get hurt. A lot of builders are going to get hurt. But greed is a terrible, terrible thing, and I have never been greedy, you know. And I'm not a religious person, but I've been to the Ten Commandments. I treat you the same way I want you to treat me. You know, that's a big thing. Is most people say, I want everything, but bugger you, I don't care what you do, you know. And I have a lot of people, young people come to me. I've talked to schools and things. I became mayor, and St Mary's College said, we want you to come along and talk to the grade 12s. And I said, I'm not much of a public speaker, you know, but no, come along, we get, you know, dignitaries come to town. So next year they rang me up and they said, well, we want you to come and talk to the grade 12s again. I said, I'm not much of a speaker. They said, well, you were the best of them all because you spoke to the kids, not above them or below them. And, you know, I've gone to a coffee club one night, some years later, and a young bloke said, you're Mr. Berghofer. I said, yeah. He said, I was in grade 12 in St Mary's when you come and talk to me. He said, no, remember every word you told me, you know. There's a young bloke here, he's not young now, but Isaac Moody, and he's done quite well in the businesses here. And he said, I was in grade 7 when you come and talked to us. And he said, and you could see the kids that were listening and the ones that weren't listening, you know. And they got too many handouts. Things are too easy to do.
Clive, thank you very much for your time. It's been great talking.
Yeah, it's been great to talk to you. Good.